Okay, so tonight we're talking about collaboration for the most part. So we began several weeks ago talking about how one essential characteristic of biblical servant leaders is their character. And I told you it's proven character, who the leader is and who the leader is becoming. And so this is our third week to focus in on some issues related to character. And tonight we're talking about the kind of person who values collaboration and will make a commitment to that. Not everybody does both of those things, I guess, what I'm trying to say. Valuing the role of others and making a commitment that that's what's important as a part of leadership. So last week, we explored the importance of engaging in honest self-evaluation. And we talked about the nature of systems. I showed you the starlings, the murmurations, and how they move. And it's an important visual because families have a motion and a rhythm of their own, and the organizations you're a part of also have that kind of rhythm. People feed off of each other and you move. It's important not to lose your place in the midst of that. So you are a part of that, but you're also just you. And so your role, what you think, what you believe, how you influence people, all of that is so important. Remember that some influence is better than no influence, right? And so I tell parents all the time, it's true that you may not be the only voice speaking into the life of your child. There are other voices, but you are an important voice. And the nature of your influence may be more powerful than the other voices that are speaking in their lives. Your presence, your voice, all of that matters. So we talked about that last week. This week, we're going to talk about how do we view and relate to others. And so I think I put on here in the handout that leadership studies in the first half of the 20th century often emphasized the importance of controlling followers, and this was the result of an overly pessimistic view of employee commitments. And so we began, early on I talked about how early in the 20th century management was created, and the purpose was controlling organizations and people and businesses. And the idea was that you're all just cogs in a machine. And so we will put you to work, expect you to do your part. If we use you up, you're easily replaceable, all that kind of thing, right? So I gave you a quote. I think I gave you this quote, from 1927. The ability to impress the will of the leader on those led and induce obedience, respect, loyalty, and cooperation. That was the leadership definition from 1927. Impress the will of the leader on those led and induce. Obedience is number one. Don't you just love that? It sounds like my parents. From such a leadership perspective, power is a tool that resides with the leader, and the leader is used to bringing followers in line with his or her agenda. By force, if necessary, you will comply. You will obey. You will submit. So the issue, or the emphasis here, positional authority, and you will go along because you have to. It was expected that this kind of leadership and this kind of management would produce results. What happened was in the latter half of the 20th century, people began to think, well, maybe there's a better way for us to produce results. Something else that happened in the last part of the 20th century, and I mean no offense to some of you of a certain age, but we had a bunch of hippies. Yeah. And the whole view of the world changed. And so it was in the late 1960s that an executive from AT&T named Robert K. Greenleaf developed his idea of servant leadership. And Greenleaf is considered to be the father of modern servant leadership. if you study servant leadership from a secular perspective, all roads lead back to Greenleaf. He was a Quaker by faith. He was not necessarily Christian, but he had some exposure to some biblical teachings. He said, and this is significant, and so I think I gave you this whole quote. He says, a fresh, critical look is being taken at the issues of power and authority. And people are beginning to learn, however haltingly, to relate to one another in less coercive and more creatively supporting ways. A new principle is emerging, which holds that the only authority deserving of one's allegiance is that which is freely and knowingly granted by the led to the leader in response to and in proportion to the clearly evident servant nature of the leader. Just looking at that part in bold that I just read, why would you give your allegiance to somebody if you're a follower? And who is that person?
Someone you respected.
Okay? Why would you give your allegiance to somebody? And who is that?
Someone who inspires me to grow.
Okay.
Trust. Yeah, I trust.
The only person, in Greenleaf, I mean, he's making a pretty significant statement, especially to the corporate bigwigs at that time, of which he was one. But the idea is the only person worth following is someone who's going to serve one who is servant first. That's who you should look for. That's someone worth listening to. And in fact, he will go on in other places to make the moral argument that that's the only person you should be listening to. So in our society, in our culture, who are the people who are leading the major institutions that make up our society? And if those people aren't servants first, Greenleaf was in favor of radical moral revolutions as such. Not that we would overthrow institutions, but he thought that the followers had a right to demand better. We need better people leading us. And that was a pretty powerful thing to say in the late 60s. By the time Greenleaf really began to get traction, we had killed both John and Robert Kennedy in this country, and a lot of people's dreams. I mean, it began to be clear the world was not going to play out. Also, you had the little thing called the Vietnam War going on.
Martin Luther King.
Do what?
Martin Luther
King as well. All of the civil rights struggle. And then by the early 70s, you had Watergate. And so people were very disillusioned, with the government and the institutions in this nation. I don't know that any of that has changed in my lifetime. And what Greenleaf said is, as people, as citizens, we have the right to expect better of the people who are leading us. And we're never going to get that if we don't demand it. We have to be willing to not put up with anything less than the kind of people who are worth following. Oh, that sounds great when you're writing briefs. I mean, come on. But he makes some valid points. And so, who are the people who should be leading us? That's kind of the question he was asking. So if leaders hold a pessimistic view of follower motivation or capacity, something like collaboration becomes a low-order priority. If, however, leaders view followers as genuine partners in organizational mission, then collaboration becomes essential for effective leadership practice. And so tonight we're talking about how we view the people around us and how we're going to connect with them. So I gave you a definition of collaboration. It refers to the process of working together towards a common goal. In Christian leadership, collaboration is essential for building the body of Christ and fulfilling the mission of the church. But in general, we're partnering together with the people who are around us because we need them, they need us. There are things that we're doing, whether it's in families or in businesses or schools or whatever. And then in the church, we'll talk a lot about tonight, how God has assembled the body of Christ. So all of this is important. So from a biblical mandate, we talk about Paul, who is often referred to as a lone wolf, this groundbreaking missionary pioneer, working on his own to establish churches and write much of the New Testament. In truth, Paul was all about relationships and partnership. He always had assistants, people helping him, traveling with him, doing the work with him. And several of his letters began with statements like, Paul and Timothy, servants of Christ Jesus. Paul and Silas and Timothy to the church in Thessalonica. And all of, he had partners that he worked with. Paul was committed to joining with others to accomplish his mission. He was constantly building networks, connecting people. He knew that the task of advancing God's kingdom and establishing these healthy, viable churches that were going to survive one generation to the next required a lot of different people working together. This was something I think Paul heard from the apostles. This was the way Jesus himself modeled working with others. So Jesus chose 12 disciples. He trained, equipped them. He sent them out with his authority, and they carried on his mission even after he ascended into heaven. So the work went on even without the physical presence of Jesus. When we study leadership in the New Testament, one of the things that surfaces is how differently Paul related to the church in Corinth than he did at the church at Philippi. The church at Corinth was a hot mess, and they were immature, they were struggling, the leaders tended to be arrogant and self-centered, and they openly and often challenged Paul's authority, called his moral character into question. And so Paul wrote a series of letters to them, and it's all just very, very dramatic. But the church was divided into factions centered on various leaders. By contrast, the church at Philippi viewed Paul as their partner in ministry. So that's what I want us to think about tonight. How Paul related to the church at Philippi and what we can learn from that. So I gave you a series of things there that we can learn from the way that Paul connected with the church at Philippi. The first one is that collaboration arises from a shared vision. Collaboration arises from a shared vision. At the beginning of his letter to the Philippians, in Philippians 1, verses 3 through 5, Paul says, I thank my God every time I remember you. I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. Their partnership. That's a significant word. Later in Philippians 1:7, he says, all of you share in God's grace with me. And it's that same word from verse 5, that partnership. It's the word we get koinonia. You heard that before? That idea of fellowship, or sharing something in common, partnering together, participating together. So what Paul shows us is that a servant leader calls others to embrace a cause greater than any personality cult. For Paul, the greater cause is the lordship of Jesus Christ and the establishment of the kingdom of God. That's the shared vision. So Paul was not above calling the church to put aside their differences and focus on something higher and greater than themselves. This mission that God gave them. The second thing we see is that collaboration encourages humility and the valuing of giftedness. In Philippians 4, verses 2 and 3, Paul calls attention to a simmering conflict underneath the surface of the church there in Philippi, and it involved two women, Euodia and Syntyche. And do you remember what Paul asked in his letter? And some of you may be looking at it. What does he say in Philippians 4, 2 and 3?
Be of the same mind.
Okay, be of the same mind, and what else?
True yoke fellow.
Okay.
Great labor in the gospel with Paul and Clement.
Okay, so he asked the ladies, whatever's going on here, you've got to do better, right? There's too much at stake. So learn how to put that aside. And then what does he ask the church to do on their behalf?
Help them.
To help them. Some of you leaders, I think he calls them elders, maybe, literally, who ought to know better, who ought to be mature enough, ought to nip this in the bud while you have the chance. Go and help these ladies to see reason for the sake of the church. And so he appeals to these ladies directly, and then he appeals to the church as a whole. You can't just let this go. And I don't know if you've ever been caught in any kind of church conflict. It's easier just to hide, to let it play out. And sometimes that's okay. Other times it needs attention. And it needs people with the moral integrity and courage to tell people there is a better way. There is a better way. And so let's find that together. And so Paul is calling them to this, calling the whole church to be a part of that. Earlier in chapter 2, he tells them to do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but rather in humility value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. And then he goes on in this just amazing hymn in verses 5 through 11, describing the humility of Jesus Christ, who should be our example of all. And so Paul really called the church towards this humility, valuing others, the contribution of others, and the view of others, and not insisting on our own way. The third thing we see is that collaboration results in greater effectiveness. And in Philippians 4, verses 14 through 16, Paul talks about the offering that the church in Philippi collected and sent to support him there. When Paul was writing Corinth, he made a big deal about telling the Corinthians that he didn't ask them for support and didn't need them to financially support him. Why did he not need the Corinthians to support him?
Because it's other church.
Because the Philippians were supporting him. That's right. So we think, oh, Paul was this tent maker. Yeah, not really. I mean, he was that, but he was getting his financial support from Philippi. And they partnered with Paul in this way. And because they did that, it allowed Paul to do things without having to go around asking every church for money. It was incredibly liberating. Did Paul work? Probably, but the only thing that we know for sure is that he was supported financially, not by his own hands so much as by the church in Philippi. The fourth thing we see is that collaboration produces a greater sense of community. And in Philippians 2, 20 through 22, Paul talks about sending Timothy to the Philippians. And he says, I have no one else like him who will show genuine concern for your welfare. For everyone looks out for their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know that Timothy has proved himself, because as a son with his father, he has served with me in the work of the gospel. Timothy had shown genuine concern for their welfare. And Timothy was the kind of person who loved the church at Philippi, who would go and work for their best interests, and also remain true to the gospel as he had heard it from Paul. So Timothy was the kind of person that Paul could send there to foster this greater sense of community. He sent Titus to bring the hammer down in places like Ephesus. Yeah, like Jim Schumann. Timothy he sent to foster community. And so it's the right tool for the right job, kind of thing. So, other examples from the New Testament, 1 Corinthians 12, verses 12 through 27, talks about the body of Christ. Every part has a role. None can function effectively without the others. And so we need all the different people. The Lord has assembled each person in the body just where he wants them to be. Each person has an important role. We can also look at Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 12, where it talks about how two are better than one. stressing the benefits of working together in unity. All right. So, just from the biblical mandate, I want to know what you think. Why is fostering collaboration so crucial just in the church's ministry by itself? Why do we even bother talking about this? What do you think?
We're a family, and we need to act like one. We can't have lone wolves.
Okay, that's true. And sometimes we do act like family.
This is true.
And it does get kind of dramatic. And that's okay too, because that goes with it. And that's okay. At the time, we just need our parents. Someone has to be mature enough to help us get through all of that. But those kinds of relationships come with heightened emotions. I don't know what else to say. That's that's the nature of the beast. Leadership comes in how we respond to all of that heightened emotions. The emotion is normal. All right, what else do you do? Why is it important? Why is collaboration crucial in the church and ministry?
The more people you have working on a task, the more you can accomplish.
More often than not, that's probably true. There may be some exceptions, but I think in general, we are better. What's the saying? I can't remember it. But anyway,
Strength in numbers.
strength in numbers, that's not bad.
One hand and
Do what?
the other together.
Many hands make a light load.
Okay, I like that too. It's that kind of idea.
Watching the Cowboys and other football teams, you can see how when they don't cooperate, they don't win.
Also true, thank you. So, the mission of the church is so large and so important that no one person can bear the burden alone. At least they shouldn't. And so it takes all of us. Those people who helped raise Moses' arms when that battle was going on. It takes, so that he could hold his staff up. It takes all kinds of people to accomplish the purpose. What about in our families? Is fostering collaboration crucial in our families? And if it is, why? Beyond the church, what about your families?
So one person is not taking on too much of the burden.
I've carried all of you long enough.
And it prepares people to go out into the future. You see it with teenagers, and I'm going to put myself in there too. Like, when you're a teenager and you're a young adult, if your parents are the only ones doing that and they've never taught you the life skills outside of the things that you learned in school, but like how to maintain a household. I remember when I first moved out, I realized my mom must have swept the house every single day. And then I now had to sweep my own house every single day if I wanted it to be her level of clean. And I remember that being really shocking at 18. Being like, what do you mean? I have to sweep every day. But that's what prepares them to be actual adults when they hit that age, and not the long-standing teenagers well into their 30s.
Yeah. It's good, Skylar.
I think that's the same thing I was thinking when you asked the question about the church, and my words weren't as ready as Skylar's were. But if we're talking about collaboration, I think what we talk about in the church a lot is discipleship, and I think this is what it looks like, right? If I'm just standing up in front of teenagers telling them what to do over and over again, when they're not teenagers anymore and they're not invited to youth programs and camps and all those things, and there's nobody standing in front of them telling them what to do anymore, well, now what, right? But if we can start bringing them into some of the leadership, if we can start showing them what it looks like to serve in ways that others can follow, now that transition happens. It doesn't feel like there's nothing for them to do. It feels like it's my turn. It feels like next one up, right?
You're able to help them grow in that maturity, not only as human beings, but also as believers in Christ. Because the most terrifying thing is to have a church filled with a bunch of immature Christians. And looking up probably a lot like the church Colossians is referencing. It's like, I'd rather be like church in Philippi if I'm picking between the two, because it can be ineffective.
Right. Yeah. So one of the most baffling social phenomena right now is the failure to launch of teenage boys. What are we doing for teenage boys where they can't make it out in the world? And nobody has a good answer to that, but they'll get to that sooner or later. One of the things that the church in America sees is the same thing in young people. We don't launch them into the world as Christians or as believers. So what Wes is saying is so important. How do we prepare them to launch and to carry their faith with them out into the world, to take their place as believers in society, and to be adults, to do all the adulting things.
And not to crumble in face of opposition.
That's right.
Well, and a lot of that is not taking responsibility at a younger age and making them do the things that they are gonna have to do when they move out. I mean, so many of us wait till the very end. It's like, oh, by the way, now this is on you. Now this, and they're terrified. They don't know how to do it, but that's because they haven't been pushed to do that from age 11 and 12. You know, learn those things at home. What?
We just see every time you say something, I say something. In like the same tone of voice and everything. I was just gonna say also that I feel like currently, just the design of just the way our societal norms right now are creating plenty of opportunities for isolation. So we're having to work really hard to push back against falling into isolation. So whether it's collaboration in the church and our families, as these kids go off to college, whatever it is, even for adults, it's easy for us to pull in and go individual instead of embracing the group. Like, it's not easy to push people into collaboration, I don't think, no matter what system you're working in. Like, people initially tend to, in my line of work, even educators who know we need each other to get the job done, like initially there is a pushback against collaboration at first. And then like a recognition of, wait, maybe we can do better if we do it all together. But I just feel like there's plenty excuses for us to do it on our own or be isolated. So this hits all of that.
But what if you lack that? Like, what if you lack that resource of a good leadership?
I wouldn't know.
You have to grow into it. You have to grow into it. It's not.
Because I think about like Chris and I, we're like learning how to lead our children to know the Lord and create like, just rhythms, and we never had that. And so like that's hard. And I don't know.
So at the very least, you have the Lord who leads you. And you have His Word where there's guidance. And if that's where your heart is, and that's what you want to impress upon your children, you have everything you need from that standpoint. Something else that you and Chris have is a wide tribe of people willing to help and walk alongside you as well. You may not, neither one of you may have had the best examples, perhaps. And you may have struggled with some rebellion against some of that authority, and that's fine too. But you're not lone rangers or alone. Does that make sense? It can feel like that. And what Jessica's saying is true. There's so much of our society that just naturally results in that feeling of isolation. It's not true.
So how do we move forward? Like,
Staying connected.
Ask for help.
I mean, she makes a good point, because a lot of kids are being raised in single parent households, and they're not getting the love and the attention at home. So what do? They gravitate to gangs.
Yep.
Well, I mean,
I was that single
well,
mom.
I would
It's-
say they do.
I'm not saying every single
Yeah.
mom, but there are.
Don't ruffle your feathers, right?
You know what? God filled in the gaps. I can tell you that. He filled in the gaps in so many places, and He does. When we do our best, there's a place where you're right. If we're following God, and even when I wasn't, He did fill in the gaps, and it's amazing how my kids turned out in spite of my mistakes. But I don't know that single has as much to do with it.
It's been shown, when you have a household without a father, boys tend to go bad.
My brother did, and it was a single family household. My brother went to the gangs. But he accepted Christ years later. And so now he is doing his very best, and he is surrounded by people, and God provides. He always provides.
And to tie to that, I think that's where discipleship, like Wes mentioned, comes in to play. I haven't seen the movie The Forge with Priscilla Shire. Man, it's a good movie.
Have you seen it? I haven't seen it yet.
It was
Cool.
We got early clips of it, and it was good,
Nice.
and I loved it. But that's one of the movies about this phenomenon that you're talking about of young men falling either behind or not being able to launch, or falling into a wrong crowd because they don't have a father, and how men who are leaders, both in their church and in business, are able to kind of step in and fill that gap. And that's happened to me at my own church when I admitted to my small group, like, man, there's certain like homemaking tasks that kind of go over my head and it seems like it shouldn't, but they totally do. Somebody invited me to come and just spend time with her doing her laundry, not my laundry, her laundry, which let me tell you, she got her laundry done so fast that day. But because for sure 2 hands are working, but she was discipling me through that task of like, and this is what I do, and this is how I pause this, and this is how, and it seemed when we told people that, they realized, oh, discipleship is a lot easier than I have made it. It's not this, I need to have the book and the degree and the checklist of things. It's a lot more simple than you think it could be, and it's more accessible. Just invite the people that are around you to do your tasks. You'll also get your tasks done faster. So it's a win-win. And it's intimidating as well. Like, let's be honest, discipleship is intimidating.
But that took a lot of vulnerability on your part to say, first of all, you were in a space with other believers who you trusted, and then you were willing to say some things about your need. And I think that kind of goes back to Raina's point. Like, it requires that the church is not going to barge the doors of people's homes. So what does that look like for us to have, first as individuals, to own the responsibility of being present in the church?
Beyond these walls.
Hey.
You gotta hold this sign of opportunities out
Okay, Morgan's ready. And so then you have to create some safety, and I think I'm going into the next point, but like creating that vulnerability and openness so that you can name that and people are willing to, even where to read, like to give that hand of outreach.
So I just want to, with my plug, so I mean, with building strong relationships like with the team, like I've really gotten to know Sandy and John, and then the people that come to my meetings. I think that's just so important, building those relationships, and then they know people, so I'm hoping that's what we're doing is we're building a good team within the church of disciples that want to go out and serve and say, like, hey, it's not as scary as it looks. We're just gonna hand out bottles of water. This is FBC, so I'm hoping that it's not as intimidating as people maybe think it is, and saying, like, look, we have 5 opportunities coming up in the next 2 months of just ways you can show up and just be present. Even with, within the church, we're going to pack bags, but then we're going to go out.
And I think that's so important too, because I think some people feel unqualified. Like, I have to be of a certain caliber to step into a role and be someone that disciples someone. I have to be this type of Christian. I have to have these qualifications, when sometimes it just comes down to walking along someone in life through all different kinds of ways. It doesn't have to be on this type of Christian. It can just be like, this is an example, this is what I'm doing, like, look at me and walk alongside me as I'm doing this.
That's good.
Yeah. I know this is a little bit off, and I do want to tell you, I was blessed to have men in my son's life that stepped in, whether it was Wes, my son-in-law, or whether it was a teacher or coach or whatever. I was blessed to have that. So the statistics could be very right. So I'm not, there is a part of me that's like, oh no, I did a good job with money, but I didn't. My son it was hard to know how to raise him, and he also did have a father. He had a father figure that may not have been perfect, but did the best that he could. So he did get some of that. But I do think you brought up a really good point, Scott. If we do happen to have those single moms in our church, man, I sure wish we could really highlight those moms and say, how do we walk alongside some of those boys? Because, Scott, we did watch even a boy that was in our church that was raised by the greatest of mom and dad, kind of, really struggled with launching. And that is a serious concern that we need to take on. Wes, and that's your boys. And they are struggling with launching.
So fix them.
Fix them, fix them.
I'll talk to you more about that after we come back.
That's why you asked Jessica's position.
So important.
But we can't just put that on them, right? We all have to.
They're leaders.
That's where we collaborate, that's where we partner, and we come alongside him, because he can't do it all. So how do we
Just like
step in
Scott
with them?
can't do it all.
And I think that's a great point that you made as well. I'm so sorry, I don't know your name. Juliana. Nice to meet you, Juliana. I know I've seen you multiple times now, and I should have asked your name before. Week 4. We'll forget that though. I ask for your forgiveness. Anyway.
She won't remember it.
No. Great. Awesome. Perfect. Is that you mentioned feeling sometimes disqualified from that position, and I think that as a leader, you have to recognize that your people are going to feel oftentimes disqualified to do what you do. As a worship leader, the only way I became a worship leader was because I had a worship leader before me that modeled servant leadership really well and continually pushed me and qualified me for things. And when she was on vacation, she said, "Skylar, you're going to lead worship." And I remember the first time she did that, I said, "I'm going to do what again?" And I don't think I'm qualified. I think we can reach out to one of the local churches and they'll have somebody that can come over and help us out. And that wasn't what happened. She just pushed me towards that in a way where she got to know me and knew where my skill set was and could push me there. And I do that same thing with my team. The first time I told somebody, yeah, you can actually pray right here if you want. Or you're going to lead this song and you're going to lead it by yourself and I'm not leading it with you. So that in 2 weeks when I go on vacation, I can go on vacation because I built those people up as little mini leaders. Because one day I'm not going to be there and they're going to be fine because there's other people that can do that.
And people, like, I find that with the youth girls all the time. Like, does anybody want to pray? And just dead silence.
Oh, just sit there in the silence.
Yeah.
I sit there in the silence.
I'll say, you can pray. And it's like, I feel like sometimes it's them feeling that I believe in you, that you can do this. And so here you go. And they do beautifully every time. But I think sometimes they need that push to be like, no, I believe that you can do this in this moment. And I'm handing the torch to you.
So listen to what you're saying, and this is what I would emphasize again, just that we are connected to one another. Yeah. We are. And so part of what's important, especially as Christians, our character, part of our character makeup has to be that commitment to others. And so if I'm allowing myself to become isolated and I make all those excuses for why, I'm the one who's in the wrong. Those connections already exist. They're already there, and there's scriptural evidence for that. I need to be committed to that so that I will actually pursue it and live that out. And not wait, not expect it to be given to me. I have to be committed enough to strengthen those connections on my own. It's part of not just my moral obligation, but just being like Christ. So part of having proven character then, as servant leaders, is understanding the importance of people and those connections we have with them, whether they're in our family, neighbors, people we work with, people we go to school with, people in our church. We are connected, and so we need to take all of that seriously. So I think, I gave you a bunch of suggestions here on how to foster collaboration. And I'm not going to go through all of this for sake of time, because there's something else I'm dying to give you to do. But you can see we want to create a culture of trust. Also, we want to encourage open communication, promote shared responsibility, resolve conflict constructively. Constructively is the key there. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to find a partner or a small group. I'm going to give you some scenarios that I want you to work on, and the instructions will be pretty clear. So I have several. So I don't know if you want to get how you want to group yourselves. Doesn't matter.
Partner, are we gonna partner or are we gonna do a full person?
Yeah, 4 because I didn't hear a word, he's gonna be.
He said scenario. That's what Oh, really? Okay, well, I have a partner now. Jess wants to be my partner tonight. This is the first time. I don't know, it's new, I'm excited.
Who do we have here?
Wait, I don't remember.
How many more do you have?
Scenario.
Wait, I missed scenario or no?
Scenario.
They distracted.
You remember that?
Distracted Matt.
It's funny what sticks.
I know.
You get for real or you get
Are you all together?
Just get in with this group, 1 to 5 person group.
Greater than 4.
That's
Collaborate.
Sometimes it is harder. The harder it is to get everybody on the same
Volunteer so
For volunteer teams for your Jewish students and youth ministries are struggling with the few remaining volunteers at home, the communication is broken down and responsibilities are not being carried out. Some volunteers feel overburdened while others feel left out. Create a plan to rebuild trust improve communication and promote shared responsibility. How do you handle the potential conflicts? I think you started the meeting. You started the meeting. Put out.
So obviously I'm not doing this right, so y'all just fill me in. Fill me in. You just dropped this one on our group. White sheet?
We've invited everyone, right? We've invited everyone. And so we give everyone a chance to say what they want to put it on the
Trust, communication, shared responsibility.
Improve communication, rebuild communication, rebuild trust, improve communication.
So you have to come in and get your letters. You have to come up with what you're going to do, and then you say, okay, for a job, okay, so this is what we're volunteering. You take things that they want, some people say no, some people say yes, and say that we need more than not answering your question. Let's say this is then it's like, okay, so we want to what do you think I think you do this? And then there might be
name the things that people are feeling again.
And you're literally passing that out to everyone and saying, what do you think it is? And someone might say, I didn't hear that.
So this is at the heart of it.
So I love that y'all are having a
Sorry, you told me to go on the list, right? She was still writing, but I'll say it now.
Overburden, let's have an important most of their projects
Communication responsibilities are not being shared.
So that's, see, I think it's not really fast, and so it didn't, I'm saying that you're getting an invitation for each and every one, each and every person, what they need. We want to do this with our party, we want to get to know. And you say, here's what, and then you say, let's talk about it. What we want to do. And then you ask.
Okay.
Well, sure. I've done it on this.
Let's saying that communication and support all of it.
I feel communicating.
Yes.
I would argue though that if this is already failed, then you haven't started off here to make it healthy.
But I don't know how you do that without improving communication. How do I rebuild trust if I'm not improving communication?
Well, we're gonna make this about your business. We don't want you to feel like.
I understand.
I think it's too consistent.
But rather than, like you're saying, how does communicator that doesn't change? Sometimes it's just the way that this is your process.
Here's go back to
I mean, if they continue.
yeah, the notes are in here, right?
Other than, there's a
So one of them was Juliana's consistency, well, for trust. So
That's what I'm saying.
Transparency and follow through.
Whatever that looks like.
Action, communication, whatever.
So in my opinion, the trust can only come with time. You have to improve the other things. Rebuilding trust over time through consistency, through actions, right? So you can focus on the other things and hope the trust comes about.
You can communicate all day long, but if that other person is not ready to receive that communication.
Well, you're right, and the communication goes hand in hand with what you were saying, like if this leader is communicating all these things, but they're not following through, not being consistent,
Yeah, you can communicate all day long. You can say, emails that you're not showing that out.
Okay, so or even just one instead of sharing.
Building the plan. I agree that that's the piece that
So do we want to like in order that we're going to do
This is not just you saying how.
You can write it down. Okay, so you're going to make sure that each person gets it.
And know it's written. Because a lot of times send things out.
Follow up with a call if they don't make it.
That's not even I think too, people like, you can give them certain responsibilities, but if that's not where they feel
And then you're going to
motivated or whatever, like in turn, that's gonna be,
express their ideas and then
it's gonna be void.
So let's build a plan of if everyone's gonna play along.
Again, we have to improve communication.
Let's just pretend like everyone's gonna do their part. We're gonna build the plan that way. Set the bar. Okay, so if we follow the notes. It talks about making sure everyone's voice is heard and valued.
what's your
And then we hear the list. It should be dialogue rather than monologue. So then that to me doesn't sound like necessarily sending outgoing emails when people read and listen, but like engaging in face-to-face conversation, right? Okay, so what kind of point, how do you wanna?
And then after that,
Dealing with the ones that.
The ones consistent.
open warm up
Yeah, I guess if you know at least
ideas and thoughts of
then you would call on I noticed that and say, what to say, you didn't sign up.
Nothing worse than going through an hour.
What do you say instead of me, so people don't feel like?
Another month.
I don't get excited when somebody says what's up.
And then the people decide.
We're ready for
We're
curious.
not ready.
You need more time?
We need 5 more days.
Some of us may have taken our prompt personally. So,
They were strategically
Like
he doesn't know
So if I gave you a couple more minutes, would that help?
Probably not.
no. Sure.
All right, a couple of minutes.
Yes, okay.
So in meetings.
We're done.
Road share fund. I think this, okay.
That's good.
I think I probably.
Wow.
So we need to establish responsibilities for everybody.
So establish a list.
Establish responsibilities.
Oh, yes, check in, yes, check in. Check in with the.
Ask for volunteers, ask for volunteers.
In-person, dialogue about these responsibilities.
And then we're gonna
No, but I
have
needed to see.
monthly updates, monthly gatherings, monthly update gatherings. Everybody gets that.
Family meeting.
Shindig. Reed, you're.
Making sure everyone knows their roles. So I think in this responsibilities thing, there's a lot about role definition that comes up.
Yeah, that, sometimes when they see things are roles for things, they're doing their part.
Well, that part that's what I was gonna say is that,
Empower them to make their own decisions within that.
leader communicates to understand what
Back and forth.
communication, more additional communication between the leader and individually. Outside of the gathering.
Wait, and I also think going back to your shared responsibilities and like establishing a list, like the leader should be establishing all the responsibilities and defining those roles. Like you have volunteers who have been invested who know some of those things.
So again, we have to communicate, we have to gather. That's what I'm saying.
You want to develop your own list?
You want to have a word file, like a room of paper.
Because you're trying to manage.
Ready,
Now let's write all our different ideas.
Looks like you're dancing now.
So.
Mocking.
Yes.
We'll start over here. So tell us about your scenario and what you decided.
So our little piece of paper reads, you and your spouse are trying to manage a tight family budget, which is a true scenario. Let disagreements keep arising about how money should be spent. One partner wants to prioritize saving for future expenses, while the other feels it's important to enjoy some immediate comforts. As a result, conversations about finances are tense and collaboration on money management has broken down. Develop a collaborative approach to manage your family's budget that considers both perspectives. How can you promote shared responsibility in financial decisions and resolve the ongoing conflict constructively? I don't know if we really have answered that, but first, we realize that we need to discipline ourselves so that our outgo matches or is less than our income. You never want your outgo to be more than your income. So you need to create a budget. And we've got to realize you can't get or do everything you want.
We hate Mr. Budget.
Probably the best idea was read Dave Ramsey and read them together. It just doesn't work if one person does. Balance each person's wants, and that's in the family. That's just not the husband and wife, but that's the children too. Without destroying the financial discipline. Look up scriptures to develop trust and understanding of money management. Always put God first. And probably the second most important thing is tithe.
That's good. All right. What do you guys have?
All right, your church is planning a community outreach event, taking care of the homeless. It's about providing meals, offering clothing donations, sharing the gospel, with the conflicting ideas of the leadership team how to execute the event. Some feel strongly about focusing on evangelism, others say meeting physical needs. He has firsthand experience of that in particular, and so but basically it just establishing, who our leader is firmly within the leadership team and conveying that to the people you're trying to lead. And of course, that's Jesus. Did he not feed them physically, but did he also give them the word? And just keep the main thing, and put people in a position to where they are comfortable serving, okay? So that they'll gladly serve. And so if your deal is just make yourself available to talk to somebody. We had a homeless mission at a church I was in before. It's once a month in Beaumont. And some people like talking to the homeless about Jesus, and some people didn't. And I would give the word, or pastor would give the word, or whatever, and others, all they wanted to do is serve. Cool, good call. And in other situations, we had a new building we just built, and turned the old building and parts of the other building into clothing and food. And they're God provided ladies, retired ladies who could mind the store. And it was in addition to, and that's one of the things you mentioned as well, is look at what your partnerships are available. That's going to determine, and y'all kind of touched on it as well, budget, whatever God provides determines to what extent you can do any of these things. But all it takes is a willing person to share the word of Christ, and that should be part of it. And then the church I just came out of had partnerships with Kroger, Walmart, and everything, and turned the gymnasium in for a gathering place for that. And then we had an overabundance, and then the people after church would go in there and take theirs, and the caveat was, share this with somebody else. So we had an overabundance of partnership food and clothing in some places, and then we would take that out. But we just kept stressing the word. And one final thing to make this all come together, share your experience. So when we finished coming back on a Sunday afternoon, which granted was very tiring, and then we would go Sunday night, we had a time of sharing. It was amazing how the Lord convinced everybody that this was a worthy goal. It's a very tiring thing to do, because you work all day Sunday, but it was an uplifting thing, because you were still making a difference in that effort, and that's what keeps people coming back.
All right. Excellent. Very good. All right. What do you guys have?
Okay, our task was you and your extended family are trying to plan a vacation together, but there are disagreements about the destination and activities. Some family members want a more relaxing beach vacation, while others prefer an adventurous activity-filled trip. There are also budget concerns, and the family is divided on how much to spend. As a group, come up with a collaborative effort to organize the vacation. How can you ensure that everyone's preferences and concerns are taken into account while resolving any budget conflicts and balancing shared responsibilities in the planning process? Okay, our main thing is to come up with what is the common purpose of the vacation. And the consensus is to have family time. We consider activities that are of interest to all family members. Everybody gets together for 3 days. Well, on one day, some group might want to go do one thing, another portion wants to go somewhere else and do something different. That's fine. You come together in the evening for family time. And then you also have to consider any physical limitations of any family members. Some that can't physically do one or more activities. Skylar mentioned a grandfather that is on dialysis. Well, that has to be accommodated and factored in. And then from a budgeting standpoint, and this is where humility comes in on a lot of people's parts, some of the people with lesser means may have to accept contributions from those who can afford more. But the family has to work this out. Because again, the common purpose is some family time.
Right. That is interesting. Good. All right.
All right. I'm mad Cynthia wasn't here this week to share this with me. The volunteer teams for your church's children and youth ministries are struggling with turnover, and the few remaining volunteers are becoming burned out. Communication is broken down and responsibilities are not being shared effectively. Some volunteers feel overburdened, while others feel left out of important decisions. Create a plan to rebuild trust, improve communication, and promote shared responsibility among the volunteers. How will you handle the potential conflicts and encourage long-term collaboration? We still need some more time. But
this is like an 8-part. But it's okay. The youth department plus Catherine Alvin is taking this. All right. So we broke it down into 3 challenges that are clearly stated. People feeling overburdened, left out of important decisions, and responsibilities not being shared. And then we looked at the 3 components that need to be the outline of the plan. So the first was rebuilding trust, the second was improving communication, and the third was promoting shared responsibility. Matt pointed out that probably they need to be prioritized from the bottom of the list up. So looking at promoting, like, trust happens after all of these other things are consistently established. So to start working on trust is kind of pointless if that's already broken down. So we led with how we would promote shared responsibilities. There were 2 philosophies on this. I feel like I should name both of them.
No, just.
One was the leader establishes a list of roles and responsibilities so that can be clearly communicated to the group of volunteers. Another thought was your volunteers often know what needs to happen. And so sometimes the leader, yes, has some things that they think need to happen within the organization, but there are others in the group who might also see things that are valuable. And if we're trying to bring people back into the decision-making process, letting them be part of the solution is valuable. So we would work on establishing that list of responsibilities, making sure roles are clearly defined, and then getting to the strengths of the members. So what do the volunteers feel are their connecting points? And we talked about the importance, actually in a written note, after we were done collaborating, that we should understand the why. Like, why is each volunteer there?
They need to know that.
Yes, they do. It's good. It's a good point.
But they don't need to know that it was an afterthought.
I'm sorry.
It was a continued thought.
I
It
was
a
being
continued thought, not
transparent.
after.
So I was practicing transparency. And then we moved into communication, because once we've established that opportunity for the 2-way communication, we talked about having some kind of regular monthly or quarterly. We talked about updates or gatherings instead of meetings where you feed people and give them the opportunity to have 2-way conversation, not just one speaking and everyone else listening, so that people can keep giving feedback on where we are with this new understanding around roles and responsibilities. And then hopefully the last piece of that is the trust that starts to develop as people are consistently encountering this engagement process.
Interesting. You need to keep that for tomorrow.
All right, the last group here.
Okay, your neighborhood is planning its annual block party, but this year organizing has become a challenge. Several neighbors have different ideas about the theme, activities, and how much money to spend. Some neighbors feel excluded from the decision-making process, and few others are not pulling their weight to help plan the event. Work as a group to create a plan that encourages better collaboration among the neighbors. How can you promote open communication, build trust, and ensure that responsibilities are shared evenly? It's funny, so much of what I'm about to say really is kind of similar to the process you guys went through a little bit. First, you make sure that everyone gets an invitation to like a big meeting. And then I think as long as the leader is really, as long as the leader puts out, here's why we're doing it, here's the importance of this event, we're building this community, and I think if they can sell them on the purpose of why they're having the event, then, people are going to be more interested. As they express different ideas in different ways, then obviously there has to be a vote, but you make sure everyone got the opportunity to say what they wanted to do. And then at that point, once it's decided what you're going to do, and I guess, you're going to reach a limit with the budget, then you want to find out what their strengths are. So that's when you have already written out what these different things they can check off. What are you good at? So you're going to have, do you want to, raise money? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? So you're making sure that they're all, putting something down and they're actually checking it off with their name on it. That means that there's some commitment there. And then there's a follow-up if you see that there are people that are not talking, if there are people that didn't fill out a form, then you want to call them directly and just say, hey, I noticed, you were kind of quiet, whatever, but you check in and say, what are your feelings about all of this? And then just kind of figure out, why they may feel left out or whatever, to make sure that you're not missing something. And then lastly, if you still have people that are not following through, then, you have another meeting and now you're putting deadlines on the paper, like, here's a deadline, this is when it has to be done, sign it, and so that's, basically we just did an event, but you make sure that you're giving everybody an opportunity to express what they're doing, but reach those common interests of why we're doing it to begin with, first and foremost.
Interesting. Okay. Here's my feedback. And if you were students in my class, here's why you failed. So, and it's not really a failure as much as we almost can't help it. What's interesting to me is how task focused you all are.
I knew this was a trick question.
And you found ways to accomplish the tasks that I gave you. I'm just impressed at how seriously you took it. So, listen to what I'm saying. And here's the thing. And this is what I want you to get. Sometimes the people are as important, or maybe even more important, than the tasks we're trying to accomplish. And I know in a perfect world, we would be able to address both, right? It's just not always the case. So what you have to do in the ebb and flow of all your relationships is know, and it's an art, it's not a science, but you have to know, what do I really need to focus on right now? The people or the task? And sometimes they are mutually exclusive. And we have to know, and the whole point is just to be aware that these connections, these people, are at least as important as the mission that unites us all together. We've been given each other, and this is important. And the people in my life need to know that I'm taking them seriously, at least as seriously as I'm taking whatever it is we're trying to accomplish. So how does it, and there's no clear answers here. You have to feel the tension. You have to feel it. And ask the Lord to help you to know how to work that out. But I admire your commitment.
But wait.
Yeah, what did you want? What did you want?
What would that have sounded like exactly?
I think it's a lot of I'm thinking about it now also with like my HR brain. If somebody's coming to me and they're telling me, I'm going to use the most common example we get, is so-and-so can't get to work on time. They're never in work on time, which one is always an exaggeration. I go, let me pull their time card real quick and see how often they're never into work on time. Oh, they were 6 minutes late today? Okay, sure, never into work on time. But all last week they were into work on time. So it's a lot of times, but that's what we'll get. We'll get the supervisors coming in saying, this employee never is into work on time. I want to write them up. I want to start them on a PIP for attendance. And we go, well, let's put the brakes on real quick. It's a Friday at 5. I'm not writing anybody up today. I'm going to go home and we're all going to take a nap.
Sure.
So we level set with them because we go, well, have you asked them what's going on? And they go, well, what do you mean? Have you asked your employee why they're not, what's going on? You've noticed that they've come into work late a few times. Have you asked them what's going on? And 9 times out of 10, they go, well, no, I didn't ask them what's going on. I go, so you didn't care about your employee to ask them why they're coming to work late? And a lot of times, it's not that this employee necessarily, there's some employees that have serious time management concerns, but a lot of times I see it is this employee has, their husband just got sent to work in a different state, so now they are the ones taking care of all the home responsibilities for them and all 4 of their children. Or they're going through some financial difficulties. Their parent is in the hospital, so they're actually coming to work straight from a hospital stay, and this was the soonest they could get in. So there's a lot of tinier problems that we deal with in HR that are less actual task problems and more just people issues.
So that's for sure. And so in HR, You have an obligation to the purpose and the profit making, and I get all of that. So if you're going to make a decision that you're valuing that over the person, you have to make sure that it warrants. You understand? Because that's a serious thing. And people expect their institutions to treat them that way, to chew them up and spit them out and to view them as cogs in the wheel. So if that is the decision that has to be made, I think you're morally and ethically obligated to make sure that the decision actually warrants that.
Yeah.
And it's a judgment call, I get it. But what we don't want to do is communicate to people that they don't matter. So that's hard.
It's getting to know
Yes,
them
because
more.
when is enough enough?
I understand. I do understand. But just you have to make sure that the decision the decision you're making is warranted. And it is. There are times when it is.
I guess I just see the plan and the people needing to be one and the same. Like, you build a plan that values the people, like that puts the people at the center of the work. Because if you don't have a plan, then things just keep going as status quo and nothing changes. So
Jessica's going to buy the world a Coke and teach us all the same. I think what she's saying is important, but I want to be clear, or just realistic, that
Michelle's been in
the
meetings.
first order of business of any system, and that includes your organizations, is survival. And so when push comes to shove, we start making all of our good intentions go out the window when it's survival. And so you have to make sure that you're taking care of business before it reaches that point, I guess. There's so much at stake. But you get what I'm saying.
Scott,
You have to be careful.
there's that one, I wish I knew that you don't have time for the story, but it's about like home-based play, right? Like, that plate's always the same size from the time you're playing t-ball. They have to hit that plate, and then you go into coach pitch, and then you go into middle school and high school, and eventually you're a pro, and that plate is the same size. They have it, and so it feels like I'm like constantly sometimes making that plate bigger for my employee to get across it.
Yeah.
And that's the part that's frustrating, is that you're like, oh, you're doing your check-in, you're doing, what are their strengths? Sometimes you just need to get the job done.
Yeah, I understand.
And and that's where it's
It's an art and not a science.
Yeah.
My only point was that the people matter.
Yes.
That was Greenleaf's whole idea. That we need to understand that the people matter. At least as much as what we're trying to do.
How much would an organization survive if they had no people?
That's right. Good. Okay, I can tell this has been exciting.
Yes.
Well, let me pray for us. Let's pray. Lord, pray that you would help us to understand the ways we are connected to one another. Family, friends, in organizations and businesses, in the church, in the community, wherever it is, Lord, we share so many complex connections. And I ask, God, that you would give us the mind of Christ regarding all of this. How do we build people up? How do we serve them? How do we foster trust? How do we communicate? All of these things are important. And I pray, Lord, that I would be someone who would be able to serve the mission, the purpose, yes, but the people who are working alongside me and living alongside me. I want to serve them as well. Save me, Lord, from my own tendencies to use people for my purposes. Don't want to be guilty of that. So, Lord, I pray that you bless these folks now, and may your will be done in their lives. Help us to serve like Jesus. May your will be done, and we love you. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, guys.